The tragic case of April Tinsley is one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in American true crime history. For over 3 decades, the brutal abduction.
Imagine a family waiting 23 years for answers. 23 years of sleepless nights, unanswered questions, and a case file gathering dust in a basement archive. The police had given up. The community had moved on. Even the media had stopped covering it. But then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning in 2019, a single phone call would change everything. A voice on the other end of the line had information that would crack wide open one of the most puzzling cold cases in modern criminal history. This is the story of how the murder of April Tinsley, a case that haunted Fort Wayne, Indiana for over 2 decades, was finally solved because someone decided to speak up. On April 1, 1988, 8-year-old April Tinsley was walking home from a friend's house in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It was a short walk, just 3 blocks through a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other. But April never made it home. Her parents reported her missing that evening, and 3 days later, her body was discovered in a ditch about 20 miles away in DeKalb County. She had been sexually assaulted and suffocated. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, and investigators immediately launched an intensive investigation. The Fort Wayne Police Department threw every resource they had at the case. They interviewed hundreds of people, collected evidence, and followed up on countless leads. DNA evidence was recovered from April's body, which was revolutionary for 1988 when DNA technology was still in its early stages. Investigators were hopeful that this evidence would lead them to the killer. They entered the DNA profile into databases and compared it against known offenders. But months turned into years and no matches were found. The case began to cool. What made this case particularly haunting was that the killer didn't just disappear into silence. In 2004, 16 years after April's murder, disturbing messages began appearing around Fort Wayne. Someone had scrawled notes on barn doors and left them in plastic bags scattered across neighborhoods. The messages were chilling and taunting, written in crude handwriting. They read things like, "I kill 8-year-old April Marie Tinsley," and contained graphic descriptions of the crime. The killer was clearly still in the area, still thinking about what he had done, and seemingly taunting the police and the community. In 2009, more messages appeared. This time, 3 notes were left in yards around the city, each placed inside a plastic bag weighted down with used condoms and trash. The notes contained similar threatening language and were clearly from the same person. Police collected the evidence and tested it for DNA. The results confirmed what they suspected. The DNA matched the profile from April's murder. They now had fresh evidence linking the same perpetrator. But still, there were no matches in any criminal database. Whoever had killed April Tinsley had never been arrested for a crime that required DNA submission. The investigation continued, but leads dried up again. The technology existed to identify the killer if they could just find him, but with no database match and no solid suspects, the case remained frustratingly out of reach. Investigators tried everything they could think of. They created psychological profiles of the killer. They conducted mass DNA screenings of men in the area who fit the profile. They released information to the public hoping someone would recognize something. But year after year, nothing broke the case open. Then came the breakthrough that would change everything, and it came from an unexpected source: genetic genealogy. By 2018, this emerging field had made headlines with the capture of the Golden State Killer in California. Investigators there had used DNA from crime scenes and uploaded it to public genealogy databases, then worked backward through family trees to identify suspects. The Fort Wayne Police Department realized this same technique could work for April's case. In early 2018, investigators sent the DNA evidence to Parabon Nanolabs, a company specializing in genetic genealogy for law enforcement. The scientists there uploaded the DNA profile to GeneMatch, a public genealogy database where people voluntarily share their DNA information to find relatives. The DNA didn't match anyone directly, but it showed familial connections to several people. From there, genealogists began the painstaking work of building family trees and narrowing down potential suspects. After weeks of analysis, they identified a possible suspect: John Miller, a 59-year-old man who had lived in Fort Wayne his entire life. He had been in the area when April was killed and when the taunting messages appeared. But having a name wasn't enough. They needed to confirm the DNA match with a direct sample from Miller himself. This is where traditional detective work merged with cutting-edge science. Investigators began surveillance on Miller in July 2018. They watched his movements, learned his routines, and waited for an opportunity to collect a discarded DNA sample without alerting him. Finally, their patience paid off. Officers followed Miller to a house he was working on as a handyman. After he left, they retrieved a used condom from the trash outside the home. They also collected cigarette butts he had discarded in public. These items were sent to the lab for analysis. The results came back definitive. The DNA from John Miller's discarded items matched the DNA from April Tinsley's murder and from the taunting messages left years later. After 30 years, investigators finally had their man. On July 15, 2018, police arrested John Miller at his home in Fort Wayne. He initially denied any involvement, but when confronted with the DNA evidence, he eventually confessed to abducting, assaulting, and murdering April Tinsley. Miller's confession revealed disturbing details. He admitted that on that April day in 1988, he had been driving through the neighborhood when he saw April walking alone. He offered her a ride and she accepted. He then took her to his trailer, where he committed unspeakable acts before killing her to eliminate the witness. He disposed of her body in the ditch where it was found 3 days later. As for the taunting messages, Miller said he had been compelled to leave them, and driven by some combination of guilt and the desire to relive the crime. In April 2019, John Miller pleaded guilty to murder, child molestation, and criminal confinement. He was sentenced to 80 years in prison, effectively a life sentence for the then 60-year-old man. For April's family, the resolution brought a complex mixture of relief and renewed grief. Janet Tinsley, April's mother, had waited over 3 decades for justice. She told reporters that while nothing could bring her daughter back, knowing that the killer would spend the rest of his life in prison provided some measure of peace. The case of April Tinsley demonstrates how criminal investigations have been revolutionized by advances in forensic science. The DNA evidence collected in 1988 was preserved carefully for 3 decades, waiting for technology to catch up. When genetic genealogy emerged as a viable investigative tool, it provided the missing link that traditional methods couldn't find. The technique has since been used to solve dozens of other cold cases across the country, bringing closure to families who had lost hope. But this case also highlights something equally important: the value of never giving up. The Fort Wayne Police Department kept April's case active for 30 years. They continuously reviewed the evidence, tried new approaches, and remained committed to finding justice for a little girl whose life was stolen. They also maintained contact with April's family, ensuring they knew the case was never forgotten. This persistence, combined with scientific innovation, finally brought a killer to justice. The story of April Tinsley also serves as a reminder about community awareness and the importance of speaking up. While genetic genealogy ultimately solved this case, it was built on decades of careful investigation, evidence preservation, and the cooperation of citizens who provided tips and information over the years. Cold cases are only solved when law enforcement refuses to give up and when communities remain vigilant. Today, April's case stands as a testament to how far forensic science has come and how it continues to evolve. It offers hope to thousands of families with loved ones whose cases remain unsolved. Technology that didn't exist decades ago is now bringing answers and accountability. More importantly, it reminds us that justice delayed is not always justice denied. Sometimes it just takes time, persistence, and the right breakthrough. If you found this story as compelling and important as we did, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We dive deep into true crime cases, unsolved mysteries, and the incredible stories of how justice prevails against all odds. Like this video to help others discover these important stories, and drop a comment below telling us which cold case you'd like us to cover next. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these forgotten stories back into the light where they belong. Together, we can keep these conversations going and ensure that victims are never forgotten. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.